Hello everyone, welcome to Career Talk. I'm Swan Sharma, an agile consultant from Netherlands, and today we are going to discuss technical project manager interview questions that were asked at PwC India. And to help us, to guide us, we have Jyoti Mishra, a seasonal technical program project manager with extensive experience in DevOps and SRE project. Jyoti also mentor different testers, Scrum Masters, and AWS cloud engineers. Okay, before we begin, if you are new to our channel, please subscribe. And if you find this session knowledgeable, which I'm sure you will, smash that like button. So with this request, let's dive in. Welcome, Jyoti. Jyoti, thank you for joining us today. Jyoti, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sunan. It's good to be back. We've
It's a
recorded a
long
lot of,
time. It's
yeah,
a long.
yeah, long time. And my bad, I've not been able to come back and
No problem. No problem.
contribute to the community, but it's always good to be part of Career Talk. Amazing content throughout our journey when we started Career Talks channel. Yeah, Sunan.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. So, friends, why we are mentioning this because we have done a series on AWS, I think, with Jyoti long time back. I think 2 years, almost 1.5 years or 2 years back, where she covered everything in detail, like half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hour sessions. I think it's a complete course which we have created. It's a, I think, 7 hours, 6 hour of session which you have created. So really appreciate that, Jyoti. Okay, but now today we have these technical project manager interview. So let's crack that also. Okay, so shall we start, Jyoti, if you allow us?
Yes, Sunan. Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Okay, so the very first one is that during a sprint, the team member encounter a performance bottleneck in their Lambda function. So how would you facilitate the resolution of this particular challenge or impediment? Yeah, Jyoti.
Okay. Sunan, before I move into answering this question, I always tell my people, whether you are working as technical program manager or scrum master, you should always take help of your team. As a TPM or a scrum master, it's good that you are technically aware, but you have experts in the team. So to tackle this scenario of us facing performance issue with Lambda function, as a TPM, you can start your discussion by asking team to find out what is the pattern. Okay, the performance issue, it could be because of CPU, memory, or the kind of code the people have written. So first step for you would be to ask team to collect data. Once you have collected data, look for patterns, right? And then involve your technical people. Your It could be your dev lead, your architect team, or anybody else who is SME in that area, and take that data with them. Okay. So through this, all the data gathering exercise you've done, the basic brainstorming you've already done within the team, you will be able to come up with either technical solution or strategic solution. So technical solutions are like your short fixes, right? And strategic solution are your long term fixes. And these are the solution which your technical team would be able to help you guide with. But as a TPM, what you have to ensure that people don't lose track of these things, right? At any day, the team is more focused on developing new feature, but you have to educate them that performance issue, maybe it's not hindering your progress at this moment that much, right? But as you scale your application, this could be your major blocker. So let the team come up with the prioritized list of solution. Ask them to get it prioritized in their sprint or whatever model they are following. Let them implement one solution, and then you have to bring the team together to see if that solution really helped. If not, then try next solution and then next solution. The idea is to regroup at constant time, keep reminding team of the action they have to take, and at the end find out if the solution which was proposed is it working or not. Maybe this would require you to involve further people, right? And finally document the lesson learned. Maybe in future some other my team come across with similar problem. So if you have documented all the lessons learned, all the step team took, like step by step, what solution they implemented, it would be useful for the other teams as well.
Thank you, Jyoti, for that. Okay, thanks. Shall we move ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is, let's say you identify a recurring problem, a recurring bottleneck in your team's workflow. So how would you facilitate a root cause analysis, and how do you come up with the solution so that this same thing will not happen in future?
Okay. So here is another interesting challenge. We are just being told that it's a recurring bottleneck. Now, as a TPM, your first approach would be to identify the bottleneck. Okay, where the bottleneck is, right? That should be our first step. And gather all the evidence and data point which can pinpoint that bottleneck. Okay. So once you've identified all the bottleneck, again here you have to involve your team, because bottleneck could be with respect to processes. So when it's about process, you know which stakeholder or which expert to involve, or it could be because of a resource constraint, or it could be frequently changing requirement, or there could be just a communication gap. So first step for any challenge as a project manager would be to gather data. Once you have gathered data, comes your brainstorming session or finding out root cause of the bottleneck, right? And you can use various approaches like, okay, using 5 whys. So, for example, if you see that the bottleneck is with respect to recurring incident, right? So now you can bring all the support teams, your architect, developers, etc., to help them understand what is the reason for this incident, and then you can go ahead and ask the team to find out the root cause. Again, everything which comes in mid of our continuous work requires people to prioritize and reprioritize, right? So here you might have to talk to the senior stakeholder, telling them that, okay, if I don't fix this bottleneck right now, it might impact my future deliverables, right? So this way you are getting buy-in from the stakeholders, and now team can work on implementing the solution. As we mentioned in previous question also, once you have implemented solution, your work doesn't stop there. You have to see if the solution really worked. Okay, and finally document your lesson learned. So if I have to summarize this answer, it would be first about gathering the data, then doing a root cause analysis. Again, here you have to take the help of your teams depending upon where the bottleneck is. Third would be you prioritize the solution. Okay, again, do you want to go for a quick win or a long term fix? And finally, implement the solution, document it, and communicate it to the stakeholders that yes, the solution is working fine, and we are no longer having same bottleneck which we had earlier. I hope, Sunan, that answers our question.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, Jyoti. Okay, let's move on. So, can you provide an example, maybe from your past experience, that how you manage the development and the deployment of the multiple microservices within a complex ecosystem? So, how do you basically coordinate all these dependencies, and you have to ensure that the smooth integration is going to happen? So, it's a tedious work. So, how you're going to manage it?
Yeah, Sunan, again, a very challenging question, I would say. But yes, I'll start. See, you would know that companies are moving towards distributed system. So you would be facing this challenge where there would be multiple teams, right, with microservices architecture. For example, for payment or e-commerce platform also, for every feature there would be a services, right? First and foremost thing would be for us to have a service map or a good documentation which talks about dependency between these services, right? Because when we go one step further, when we talk about deployment or releasing these services, it's very important that we understand the relationship between the services. So I would say first and foremost thing would be to document the dependencies. Create a service map which talks about, okay, how the things flow with respect to that distributed architecture. Once you have that data, again, we've seen that people, what they do is, since it's a distributed system, everybody is working on their microservices, people just deploy the changes which they have created without understanding that maybe the same region is being used by other teams for testing their feature, and it might cause some conflict. So for you as a technical program manager, it's very important that you have kind of a release cadence or a deployment cadence wherein you know on which day which team is deploying and what is the sequence of deployment. Also, as a team, you should have a good rollback strategy, because here everything is dependent, right? And apart from good rollback strategies, also you should have a, a absolute solution which helps you to test the integration between these two or multiple component. So it's not just developing, deploying. It's very important. The testing is also not that people are just focusing on their component. They verify, oh, my component is working fine. You need to have a dedicated team which is responsible for end-to-end testing. And finally, monitoring. Here, monitoring plays a key role. I've seen that in case of any incident, people would go on and then they say, okay, nothing is wrong with my services. And another team would be called, what happens with this kind of a solution? You are increasing your SLA time. You're increasing your mean time to resolve. So there should be a dedicated team which understand end-to-end functionality, and there should be central monitoring tool through which we can trace the call flow, or we can find the logs without being dependent on different components, right? So even for example, Sunan works for microservices A and I work for B, but in case of any issue, even Sunand is able to pinpoint, oh, I think the issue is with the services owned by Jyoti, and from where you can find all this thing through our central monitoring tool. Yeah, so again, let's summarize. First, documentation of call flow, dependent services. Yeah. Then a cadence, like when you are going to deploy which service. Having a team which is responsible for end-to-end testing, not just the component testing. Finally, strategy to roll back or how you deploy. Okay. And finally, a good central monitoring and observability tool, which helps you trace the call flow or find the log. Yeah. So this is how I would approach this problem.
Thank you for that elaborated answer, Jyoti. Yeah, wonderful. Let's move on. So let's say during a sprint, your team encounter a technical debt that is, yeah, nowadays is pretty common. But then the challenge is that you have to prioritize this debt against a new feature that is your team is developing. So how you going to work on this, unexpected technical debt which just appeared, So yeah, that's the question.
Okay. Yeah. You might see that I'm reiterating certain things again and again because I just want to re-emphasize that yes, we've somebody told us that this is technical debt, but you have to get it confirmed from your stakeholders, right? So here it could be your say if the technical debt is with respect to the development we are doing, right? So in that case, you have to involve your dev lead, so that and have that discussion. Okay, so do we want to go for a short fix? Okay, for example, it could be that we see every day our system is down, which is hindering our test teams uh, feature testing, right? Okay, one way would be, if we take this scenario, right, it's a bottleneck, technical debt, developers are delivering, but we are not able to test and send the feature in the production. So one way could be like once you talk to the developer or testing team and you get to know, yes, it is a problem, but do we have workaround for it? Okay, if we have a workaround, so here what we can go for is, we know at every day 8 a.m. our services go down. So you can auto remediate it, create some script which at 8:05 or 8:10, or a script which is at regular interval polling those services and ensuring that it is up and running. Okay, and you can integrate those automation script with your Slack or Microsoft Teams, whatever channel or apps you are using to notify your user, and you can let them know, okay, the system was down, through this script we've restarted the system and you're good to start. Okay, this could be one quick fix, right? Because we can't hinder the development work. Okay, your sprint is frozen. Yeah, you have to adhere to your sprint goal, etc. Again, I'll come to the situation where you might have to reprioritize. Okay. Second thing, for same problem, what you can do is, we know now we find a technical solution. A strategic solution would be to debug, okay, and find out what is causing this. How, like, from when this problem started to occur? Is it just now? then the question would be to understand it is happening right now in a test environment. But if it's because of some recent change, it would impact production. And we can't afford to make production down, right? Okay. How would you handle this? You get this prioritized in next sprint. So you can say, okay, 60%. Ideally, this is what we used to do in our previous organization. We never used to pack our sprint with 100% of deliverables. Okay, so we had bifurcated. Okay, 60% is what 60 or 80% is what team would work on the things which we have identified as part of sprint goal, and we'll keep a buffer of 20%. So that 20% of time you can use to troubleshoot and find out the pattern. And now in next sprint, you can make prioritize it and make it part of your sprint goal. Okay. But if this technical depth is hampering your current development work, now is the time to work with your product owner, dev lead, and other stakeholders and make them understand that if we don't take care of this technical debt in this current sprint, it might affect future deliverables. So then you might have to do reprioritization of certain feature. And here you can take help of your product owner, because at any day you would always have some must have, good to have, nice to have, and get those swapped.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Jyoti.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
Anand.
let's move on. So, your team need to integrate a AWS API gateway with the backend services for a new feature. So, how do you ensure that this integration is effective, efficient, and secure?
Yeah, you would see nowadays, yes, the companies are going towards API gateway, right? So even in our organization, we use something called as APG, which is like Google's API gateway. Yeah. So for this kind of integration, if we take previous example where you have distributed system, right? So for distributed system also, example, we want to, for the distributed system, we don't want microservices A directly talking to microservices B, because we are putting all the load on microservices B to take care of authentication, security, API throttling, etc. Right? So now, first, see, you have to understand if this is required or not. Okay, at times what people do is they would add API gateway without understanding that you are increasing the hop. Like earlier, microservice A was able to talk directly to microservice B, right? But just adding a API gateway, yes, you are getting any added benefit that your API gateway is acting as a security layer, authentication layer, right? It is rate limiting. It's ensuring that, okay, you don't get burst of requests at one time, right? So first you have to understand if it is required or not. I'm assuming for this case, yes, API gateway is required. So as I said, you have to take care of how much of access you want to give to the API gateway, right? Second, you have to take care of the security, right? Because microservice A would send requests. Now this API gateway has to ensure that what kind of a data is being sent to microservice B. Third, rate limit. Okay, how many of request you, it's not that just this API gateway is just being used between A and B. There could be C and D, which is also using the same API gateway. So you have to take care of rate limiting, resource utilization, etc. And finally, which I see is the problem is naming convention. So a third person should be able to find out, okay, if we have to talk from microservices A to B via API gateway, what is that service? Maybe A says get payment detail, but when you have done integration with API gateway, the name is different. You just use, okay, service A, service B. So it's very difficult to find out the okay, what is calling what is upstream system, what is downstream system. So you should have a good documentation around mapping plus the nomenclature. And third, in case of any issue, as I said earlier also, you need to have a central monitoring team, right? Sorry, central monitoring app, and the log pattern which these services are following along with API gateway should be self-explanatory. So these are a couple of things. There could be more, but at the moment I can think of these, like the access you want to give to the API gateway, security, rate limiting, nomenclature, dependency, or a kind of a service map which says, okay, how the calls are flowing, and then the logging pattern which you are following.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that, Jyoti. Okay, let's move on. So the performance of a critical database query in your application is degrading over the period of time. How would you diagnose this particular issue, and how you are going to optimize the query for to improve the performance of the application? Yeah.
Okay, allow me a minute. Let me think. Okay, I've seen scenario in my previous organization. Okay, let me take which we found in one of the company where we were responsible for ensuring secure payment, etc. Okay, again, the bottleneck or the performance issue which you have found out, what is the root cause of that performance issue? Okay, so that would require us to collect the data. That would be our first step. For any problem, first step should always be to identify the patterns, identify the data. Okay, and then you can go for problem solving, brainstorming, etc, etc. Okay, so in this company what we thought we found is that so this particular app was used in big billion day sales, like, and it was approaching, right? So we didn't had time to revamp our database, right? Make it distributed or do bifurcation between read, write, query, etc. So here we went for technical solution, which is like quick win. What we did is we added alert on our system to find out pattern, like, okay, for what kind of a transaction we see spike or performance issue. Okay, so we filter out all such queries which was causing this performance issue, and then next step was to have indexes to ensure that in the code when you're trying to access the database, you are using enough where clauses, right? What people would do is select star from table. So you have to write select what column you want to select from the table where employee name is Sunan, order ID is 5. So this is how we went ahead and updated our queries. And it's not just about updating, you have to test also, right? So here we had to coordinate between developer and tester. We had to work on weekend also, but yes, that was a quick solution which we could implement, right? So with this approach, developers were making changes to the query. We knew the regression point. We did the testing. We ran regression coverage, and we were able to certify and validate. Yes, we are not seeing performance issue. At times, the performance issue which we see is not just because of the query we've used. It could be because of the caching mechanism, etc. Right? So here is when you have to go for a long-term solution. Okay. For a sale, we this is the best we could do, right? But if you have to talk about long-term solution, then you have to involve DBAs. Now it's not just the work of developers, right? You have to have an expert in the team. So you can ask the developers to, okay, run explain commands which gives you explanation of databases, tables. So they are expert, they would know, okay, what they have to do. Maybe a stored procedure needs tweaking. Maybe they need to re-index it. Maybe they need to distribute their data database, right? Or they have to scale it, either vertical, horizontal. It could be anything. So here you have to involve your technical people and come up with list of solutions. At one time you could not implement all the solution. So solution A, what was the result? Solution B, what was the result? And finally document everything.
Wonderful, Jyoti. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on. This one is on a architecture part. So let's say your team is struggling with designing a scalable architecture for, let's say, any upcoming feature or any upcoming product. So how would you provide a technical leadership to guide them through these kind of challenges?
Okay, scalable solution you are saying, right? Scalable solution. Okay. Okay. I recently heard a term, Sunan. First you have to think on the paper. Okay, so solution which you are trying to implement, first understand business case scenario, right? So once you understand the system, maybe this system would be used uh, only in certain seasons. Okay, if that's the scenario, then you don't have to think about auto scaling. Okay, uh, for all the times, right? You know, okay, in December there would be a lot of requests on this system. So I have to prepare for auto scaling during that time, right? So net first you have to understand the business scenario, business use case which you are trying to implement through this system, your customer base. Okay. Why I'm saying customer base, maybe you are a company based out of India, and this application would be used by, say, Netherlands. So it's now important for you to where you want to have your data center, right? So first would be think on the paper, that is understand the business, brainstorm it with the technical experts, right? Once you have the solution, you understand what is it that we are trying to do. Okay. Based on that, now you can ask team those questions, right? Even you have to do your study, right? Nowadays you would know there are some good architectural paper available from various companies, right? So you also do your study. You might not know answer to all the questions. Now as a TPM, your role is to asking those questions from the team. Okay, so Sunan, do you think we need to have caching mechanism here? Sunan, do you think we need API gateway here? Okay, what about auto scaling? Yeah, on what conditions we are going to auto scale? Yeah, should our database do we want to have some way to do disaster recovery? Where should we host our data center? How many requests this application should be able to handle? Do you want to go for a NoSQL database or a SQL database, like relational or non-relational database? So as a TPM you have to ask those questions. It's team who would come up with the answer, right? Yeah, so once you have the business scenario, do your research. If you have worked on similar project previously, you'll have a lot of things, right? And finally, as I say, have a strategy with respect to how we are going to, you'll see teams, they develop the product and later in sprint they come up with those technical decks. Okay, how do I deploy? Okay, there are so many services, how I need to deploy. Okay, maybe one team use a separate set of libraries, the other team use different set of libraries. They're not what do you say, they are not adhering to the contract. Okay. So you have to have a good process also. So you have to think long term. Development is one part, architecture is another part, process is the another important part. And finally, yes, remind team about, okay, monitoring, observability. Yeah, it's not just, okay, you created product, you tested and it's in production. You should think beyond production as well. So here is when things like monitoring, observability, proactive alerting, all these things come in picture.
Thank you for that, Jyoti, elaborated answer. Great. Okay, let's move on. So the next question is on the reporting part. So yeah, I mean there are a lot of stakeholders which are involved into the project, right? So how are you going to create that detailed report on a project progress? It can include like your risk, issues, dependencies, different status, red, amber, green, or things like that. So what basically what do you ensure that these particular reports are accurate and timely? It's always a challenge. So to gather that kind of data from the different team members
Yeah.
from different teams. So yeah, Jyoti.
Okay, so I'll share what we did in one of my organization. Okay, it was little mature organization. So see, idea is to constantly have connect with your stakeholders. Okay, I'll come about the data source and how we can ensure that we are regularly sending the updates. But the first part is to having a regular connect with stakeholders. I've seen senior stakeholders, they don't mind us being not being able to produce what we committed. Okay, if we have reasons for it, valid reasons. Okay, so it's important you're constantly meeting. Now with senior stakeholders you can't meet every day, so it could be either one bi-weekly connect and one quarterly connect. So quarterly connect would be about your progress of the epic, right? So when a quarter would have started, you might have committed to 4 5 epics. So now is the time where you'll talk about the epics. Okay, how many of the epic out of, say, you committed 4, you were able to do 2 you were not able to do, or 1 you were able to start and the other you could not start, with the reasons. And bi-weekly connect could be about the challenges team is facing and proactively letting them know that, okay, with current progress we see that we might not be able to deliver the fourth epic. So now when you go in the quarterly meeting, you would have already set a expectation of stakeholders that yes, we were meeting bi-weekly, and Jyoti has already informed that because of ABC reason, we were not able to deliver this particular epic. So they would answer on your behalf, I've seen. Okay. Now, how do you go about ensuring we are regularly sending updates? Understand these are our senior stakeholders. Okay, so you can't go about elaborating the details. So it should be a simple template, okay, wherein you can just say, these are the 4 things team is working on. Here is the blocker, and you can call out any help you need from them. Okay, what should be your source of this data? It's not just that Jyoti's team is sending this report. Sunand would also be sending the report, right? So what Jyoti says and what Sunand says about any story should be same, right? Here is when your project management tools come into picture. So your source of truth should be same. So here in this case, Jira was our single source of truth. And we had a process like, okay, how we are going to create story, how we are going to log work, how we are going to add dependencies, risk, etc. And then we had automated the report generation part. So it was not manual. It was the structure which we were following in Jira, and then we used to send an automatic report. So now for a senior stakeholders, he can clearly see that okay, Sunan's team is on track, Jyoti's team is lagging behind, and what is the reason. Okay, and then they used to tell us, okay, Sunand is doing this really well, Jyoti, why don't you adopt this? So the idea is have single source of truth. And instead of creating the reports manually, initially you might have to create the report manually, and there would be multiple iteration. Maybe team A might not like your way of presenting content. So when you have a common understanding, automate that process and send it after every sprint closure. Report used to go directly to the senior stakeholders. Again, you just had to close the story and report used to get generated. So you don't have an option to play with data also, right? It's all through that single platform.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now this one is interesting. Let's say one of your new team member joins your project who is unfamiliar with your CI/CD pipeline setup. So how would you basically onboard that particular team member? Like, how do you ensure that understand the complete deployment process and the best practices which your project follow or your account follow? Yeah, Jyoti.
Okay, Sunan. So here, see, our the person who is being onboarded, I'm assuming there could be three category. Maybe uh, there is someone who is just fresh out of a college. Okay, for them, yes, the kind of training you would have to do would be different. First, you have to make them understand whole SDLC process, right? Okay, you come up with requirement, there is prioritization, then somebody develops it, etc. Right? So for this question, I'm assuming the person is experienced. Okay, it's he or she is say 2-3 years experienced person. So he's been doing development. Again, I'm assuming here our user is developer or say tester. So we can first ask them what is it that they understand by delivery, deployment, etc. Okay, so maybe they are not using tools, but they'll be using same process what is used for DevOps, right? First you write your code, you check in. On check-in there would be some test cases. One test cases passes, right, you deploy the changes to the next region. Yeah, and finally there would be deployment in production. So if you know that this person knows those steps, okay, now you can tell them, okay, for us, what is our source code management tool? So we are using Git. What is our branching strategy? Right? There are people, they'll be using, maybe this person from where he or she came, they were using source code management tool, but there was no branching strategy. Everybody could push their changes, right? But here, as it's your mature team, you are following some branching strategy. There would be some naming convention, right? Because it's a common tool used across all the team. So first you'll start about this part. Okay, how do you check in your code? Now you can ask them, okay, once you check in, you have to build your code, right? So you have some continuous integration tools like Jenkins, etc., which helps you to build the code without manual intervention. This tool helps us to deploy your changes to the test environment. Okay, before testers coming into picture and doing manual testing, we run some automated test cases. For that we are using things like Selenium, Rest Assured, it could be anything, right? And finally, you can tell them once everything is done, we want to understand the code which has been checked in, what is their coverage, right? So, okay, for coverage, we are using, say, SonarCube, Jacobo, anything. It's all about tool, but processes they would know, right? Maybe they were doing everything manually, but here everything is automated. Okay. Yeah, you want to see the security, you want to see the code smell, etc. So tell them which all tools are used. And finally, the deployment part. So this I've answered based on my assumptions, Sunan, that the
Yeah,
person knows about the steps already. It's just that through this process, I have to give him the walkthrough of the tools, the processes. And also it's good that all the sessions which you have, Sunan, you should get it recorded so that next person, when he or she joins, can go through those recordings, and then you can have a quick connect, right? And
correct.
finally, a good documentation would help.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Jyoti, for that. Okay, so friends, we still have a couple of more questions, I think, but then we are running out of time. I think it's almost 30 to 40 minutes. So we don't want to, extend this session. So we are stopping this session as of now over here only. But of course, friends, I'm sure like you already gained a lot of knowledge from this session. Just comment second part and we'll bring the second part very soon. So yes, of course, if you found this today's session helpful, useful, knowledgeable, remember to like, subscribe, and yeah, take care. And thank you, Jyoti, one more time for taking your
Thank you,
time
Sunan.
out this weekend. So thank
Yeah,
you, Jyoti, and thanks everyone. See you until next time. Bye, everyone.
yeah,
Thanks, Jyoti.
yeah. Thanks, Sunan.